In my previous video, I showed you how I done a couple of trees in elevation or in orthographic, either in floor plan and elevation or sections. But then in this video, I shall be discussing about how to integrate trees and plants in perspective drawings. Again, as I mentioned before, trees are great at making you relax. More green space, we're more attracted to natural things like trees and plants. It provides a good shading. Bushes, like for example, would control the flow of people, restricting them at times where not to go. So normally that's a natural, much more better solution in design rather than having a sort of like a fence. So, and then this is another view of the entrance, the main entrance, and what I was intending to happen. Of course, the floor plan. So when I'm illustrating trees, I just show sometimes a subtle outline of how big that is. Like for example, or else this becomes too much busy, and the focus is not going to be onto the design outline of this space. So when you're drawing trees or plants, don't draw too much detail on them, or else they become very distracting. I plotted a perspective drawing of this same project. Now you can see the outline of the front tree here in red. It's really this big. So it's everything that I do here is in scale. For example, this very similar tree would sort of like more or less follow the scale of this thing. Okay, normally this one I'm placing this as more between with a 6 meter to 9 meters in height, usually for a medium tree. From the ground to the lower part of this would be something like around 2 meters. So that gives me like a 3 to 4 meter radius of or this gives me like a 3 to 4 meter diameter of this tree. So remember to always follow a sort of scale. But in this case, in the final illustration, I did not illustrate the tree at the front because I did not want to exactly distract the proposed architecture. But what you can do when you're trying to draw still the tree and illustrate it properly is that you can do the silhouette. So not a solid line, just a sort of like a silhouette of the tree, but nothing else. Just to note this. Hope you can see this. Something here. Very subtle, and it need not be so detailed. Now, if I'm going to take some paper and how this is illustrated, of course, I would know where the location of my tree. Now it's somewhere there where it's going to grow. I'm going to be putting a bit of the bushes. So based on scaling of this, it's going to be like this. Just place in some dotted lines. Just define first where this is. So just the outline. Do a bit of the branches, just that. Nothing so fancy, but of course the farther tree is really much smaller because I'm doing this in scale. So if this is following, of course, the vanishing point of the perspective itself now. So if we illustrate where these converging lines to, this is of course the street horizon line. I'm going to illustrate this. Hopefully it shows up in this film. And of course, again, try to match the relative size of the tree in front. So this is going to be like this. It's going to illustrate that, but nothing so fancy because it's going to overwhelm the architecture. And if we illustrate the architectural outline of this illustration, so these are the volumes of this structure. Should be like this. So and in my proposal there, I have some bambusa here. So again, not too overwhelming. The branches of this bambusa that I'm proposing. And the street, and of course the parking area. So if it's too much, try not to do so much, just the outline of these trees. So again, simplify, abstract. Don't go and try to draw every leaf or try to illustrate them. Just a simple type. Okay, here I'm showing you some of the bushes. Of course, again, refer to some of the research that you references from the internet or pictures that you take yourselves. This is too much right now if I'm going to illustrate this. So I would try to avoid doing too much, but like do a subtle outline of a tree, for example, here, or in this case the bambusa is going to be like somewhere there. So I'm just doing an outline of that, just a silhouette. But always try to follow the rules of perspective. For example, this one, if I'm going to create a tree here, the vanishing point, of course, the 2 point, I'm going to be illustrating a tree, for example, a new tree here. I would follow the construction lines, the perspective construction lines, to be like so, and the tree would be somewhere like that. So I'm just going to create a bush, but just an outline. And sometimes if you're just illustrating to enhance the architectural illustration, okay, for example, this one, I want everyone to sort of like go and look at that. I could add in a few more trees here, silhouette. Farther away trees are just the outline or the top of the tree. So if this is the firewall, and then silhouettes of neighboring houses. But that's it. Don't do an over detailed illustration of these types of trees. And again, try to avoid doing too much of a thicker line. So what I recommend is a 0.3 millimeter 0.3 millimeter type of line. Don't try to illustrate them with very, very thick lines. So here I'm even for people, I'm not going to be illustrating them very much more with a thinner line than as opposed to something that's a thick line. Too much attention. So that's how you draw trees in perspective. It's relatively to the size. So if you refer to one, draw one first and then try if other trees farther away with the same type of height would be smaller than what's in front or front more more front. But yeah, don't just that you don't overwhelm the architecture what you're trying to propose. So again, you could illustrate that, have a bit more of the tree, some of the branches there. This is a good placement for another tree, for example. Always check your floor plans, okay? When you're, maybe that would not work, so but in this example, I'm just showing you how to scale this. So I'm scaling via the perspective lines, construction lines, and then some bushes here. So that's when this is where I'm illustrating a bit more silhouette than not. So but here in this video, I did not talk about how to render or put shadows in. I'm just concentrating on how do you draw the lines. Keep in mind that it's better to draw the trees with more segmented types of lines, and rather than having something very solid. And do not use thick lines, or else you're going to overwhelm the scene, and it draws the trees will draw attention. So try not to do that. So here is an example of a tree silhouette. Tree which are rendering with some watercolor, but this is more for illustration, practice purposes, when I was just doing a bunch of practices. But of course, eventually, when you do more of these types of illustrations, the better you become at it. And yeah, this is just something that is I would like to illustrate. Just practicing. And if you could take a look, if I place it into there, this is too much details, too much drawing attention. So this should be lighter than what it is now. Something like this would be just fine. Okay, so some parts, if you notice, some parts are very boring, and if you can illustrate a tree or bambusa, sure, you can cover up this boring part of the building. It is possible. If you take a look at the floor plan, if there's a possibility there, yes, we have one, something like here. So there's a chance for me to create some sort of bambusa like, or like these taller types of trees, so that this boring part or very plain wall of this building can be with some trees. So something like this. So you can color that in the green because it's an empty space of wall. So it's a surface that is very plain. Then you can do some things like you can do some tall bushes here, so that this space this is not so boring. And usually I place in some people or entourage here, but yeah, putting in that element of a tall bush that is plausible here, and also these bambusa that is plausible also. Yeah, you can do that. Hopefully this video has helped you in understanding a bit more in how to illustrate plants and trees into your architectural perspective scenes. So hopefully this helps. Thank you very much for watching.